Hi, this is Scott Valor with Excalibur Data Systems, and we're going to talk about anchoring in Cherwell and how that can give you a more dynamic user experience in your portal, on your dashboards, and in your forms, so that form elements can move and or grow and shrink to take advantage of the different size monitors that are out there so that everything feels better. So whether you're on a 40-inch wallboard or a 15-inch laptop, everything just fits better. This is Cherwell 8.1.2. It's in my VM, and this is an example dashboard that I mocked up using all the default anchorings. Everything's anchored to the left and to the top. So no matter what size I make stuff, as I grow and shrink the window, everything just stays. It doesn't take advantage of the real estate that I have. Ideally, this vertical rail would grow and take advantage of the space that we have, and these graphs would expand out, and the text would move. So let's walk through editing the dashboard. We'll do a couple sections at a time, give you different examples of how things work. So in order to change the anchoring of this, we're right-clicking on it. You could also go up to the toolbar, the top up here, and change it. And I'm going to anchor this to the bottom. I'm going to leave the right anchoring off. And to make it a little more obvious, I'm going to bring this up just a little. When you anchor an object, the way that it works is that the gap, the margin that you have, is maintained in that particular direction. So right now I've anchored it to the bottom, and it's going to maintain this gap that we have. It'll keep this fixed distance. So as the window gets taller, this black vertical bar is going to expand, it's going to grow, and maintain this gap. The left edge is smack up against the side, so it's going to stay tight there. And the top is going to do the same thing. The right side, it wasn't anchored, so it could care less what the right margin does. It's not going to expand or contract. It's going to maintain its same physical dimension. So here's how it goes in action. The bar now grew, and it maintained this margin that we had at the bottom. So let's make this so we can resize it. And you'll see that as I grow this piece expands because it's anchored to the bottom. It, however, won't get any smaller than the size that I had it when I was editing the dashboard, but it will get taller. When you're editing your dashboards, your portal, your forms, whatever you set the size to be on that page, that's the minimum size that it's going to be. Anchoring simply allows it to either move or expand. In this case, because the top is anchored, it stays flush, and the bottom is anchored, so it's actually going to stretch this element vertically. Let's go ahead and put this to the bottom all the way. And then let's go ahead and talk about this floating title. I would like to keep this title centered and still keep it up tight to the top with respect to where it is. So I'm going to leave the top anchored, and I'm going to turn off the left and the right and the bottom. What that's going to do is maintain this top gap, this margin that we have. It's going to stay fixed. However, the left and the right margins, I've not selected them, so it's going to proportionally maintain them. So as this stretches wide, this floating title will stay in the same relative position with respect to the right margin and the left, and so it'll kind of scooch over to the right as we make it wider. It'll essentially stay centered, well, at least as centered as it is right now. That means that this text off to the right is going to get overrun by this floating title at some point. So let's go ahead and change the anchoring so that this text moves off to the right and still maintains its top position. All right, let's go see what that looks like. So the floating title is floating. The Cherwell company name and the filter is flighting off to the right. Our vertical is growing. And all of these elements now really look dwarfed and haven't taken advantage of the extra space that we have. So let's go ahead and allow them to grow as we change the size of the window. So let's go ahead and work from the top down. I'm going to go ahead and anchor our team workload graph to the right and the bottom. That's going to maintain this right margin and this bottom margin that we have. So as the form gets taller, this workload graph is also going to get taller. And as it gets wider, it'll get wider. There's nothing off to the right, so that's not a problem. And these items are in the way. So as this workload graph expands down, it's going to interact and overlap these lower graphs. So we're going to have to move them out of the way. The way we're going to do that is we're going to anchor them to the bottom and remove the top anchoring. So they maintain their position relative to the bottom margin instead. That lets them float down. The donut, I want it to float down and also move out to the right, because the task graph off here to the left, I'm going to have it move down, and I'm going to tie it to both margins. That's going to keep the left margin anchored right here, but the right side of the graph is anchored to the right margin now. So it's going to actually expand out. So this donut has to have to unanchor it from the left so that it can move and get out of the way. The matrix down here, we're going to go ahead and anchor it to the bottom so it gets out of the way as well. And just for fun, as an example, I'm going to anchor it to the right. We're going to come back and move it back to the left, but just so you can see everything in motion at once. So we've got our floating title moving, Cherwell and the filters are moving to the right. Our workload graph for the team now got wider and subtly taller. It's not a whole lot, not yet. Our team task workload, it's expanded slightly. The donut graph, it didn't change size, it just moved down and to the right. Our closure rate matrix, it moved down and it moved to the right, so we have it floating. And this vertical bar, it went ahead and grew. And as we expand this out, you'll see everything dynamically growing to fill our screen. So now this, if this was on a dashboard, if this was on a wall board, in our portal, on a form, it doesn't matter. It's going to adjust to fit. A lot of times I don't like this dead white space, which is why personally I would go ahead and put this anchored off to the left instead, so that it stays over there and everything has anchor points visually, and you have non-captured white space over here. So it just feels a lot nicer, and everything is growing. Now you'll also notice that none of these graphs will get any smaller than they were originally designed. So the task workload never gets any skinnier than it was in the base dashboard design. Same thing with the team workload. And it doesn't get any shorter vertically, so it's not going to get squished down, but it can grow to take advantage. So as you're designing these dashboards using the anchors to allow them to be a little bit more dynamic in their position and their dimension, you may consider making them slightly smaller to start. This works really well with a grid control that has a lot of columns, because you can allow it to expand out to the right and you don't have to keep scrolling to see all of the columns in that grid control.